Saturday morning, 17th of December, 2022, just after 10 a.m. Outside the Papatoetoe Seventh-day Adventist Church on Puhinui Road, 200 people are gathered on the grounds. Not a funeral, not a court hearing, a graduation ceremony for the Grace Foundation, a rehabilitation program for people the organization itself describes as truly on the margins of New Zealand society. People fresh out of prison, people trying to start over, people most of society had already written off. The service had just finished. Everyone was waiting outside for a Christmas barbecue, kids running around, adults catching up. The easy feeling of the last week before Christmas. Daniel Eliu, 46 years old, known as Sa-Dan Notorious, was standing in that crowd, 6 months into the program. 6 months of trying to step away from the world he'd lived in his entire life. Then a man stepped out from the crowd, a gun hidden under a black jacket. 6 shots, 4 seconds. Eliu went down in front of 200 people, including children, on the grounds of that church. He was dead within minutes. What nobody tells you is why Daniel Eliu was there that morning. And that changes everything about this story. Hit subscribe now, because what comes next goes deeper than any headline covered. Before we get into the case, you need to know who Daniel Eliu actually was. Not Daniel Eliu on a charge sheet. Not Daniel Eliu on the front page. Daniel Eliu on the morning of 17th of December 2022. He'd been 6 months into the Grace Foundation program. 6 months showing up every Saturday with the same group of people, all of them trying to rebuild something. He wasn't graduating that day, but he was there for the people who were, because that's what you do when you've been in something with someone for 6 months. That's the man who was standing outside that church at 10 o'clock in the morning, president of the notorious chapter of the Mongrel mob in Auckland. A man with a long criminal history, a man police had been watching for years, and also a man who was trying to find a different way out. Both things were true, at the same time, in the same person. To understand this case, you need to understand the road that brought Eliu to that point, his most serious conviction. In 2006, he attacked and kidnapped a man he believed had narked on a gang-affiliated friend to police about a loaded pistol. Using a box cutter, Eliu slashed the victim's face from his jaw to his hairline, a wound the Court of Appeal later described as a particularly bad crime of its kind. He was sentenced to 11 years after his release. He went back to the same world. In 2020, as part of Operation Casino, a police investigation into methamphetamine distribution across Hawke's Bay, Eliu was pulled over in Auckland. Found in his car, $229,960 in cash. That same day, police raided the Hastings home of a fellow mobster and seized a further $26,755 in cash, along with 2 motorcycles. Intercepted phone calls between Eliu and his associate laid out the deal. 2 kilograms of methamphetamine for $230,000, plus a $20,000 delivery fee. Eliu pleaded guilty to 2 charges of conspiracy to deal methamphetamine and 4 charges of supply. By December 2022, he was waiting to be sentenced, and he was 6 months into Grace Foundation. Both things, same person, same morning. Saturday morning, Thomas Tahitahi, 42, left his home in Massey, West Auckland. He drove to Papatoetoe, England, picked up an unknown individual, then drove to Papatoetoe. The car, a Mercedes-Benz. That detail matters. CCTV at Westgate Shopping Centre had already captured the same car, with Tahitahi, on December 13 and 16. 4 days before the shooting, police noted something specific in the footage. A distinctive scar on Tahitahi's left shin, clearly visible. That scar would become the evidence that identified him. On the morning of the 17th, Tahitahi walked onto the church grounds with a semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle concealed under a black jacket. He approached Eliu from behind. First 2 shots, 1 into the back of each leg. Eliu lost control of his body and fell forward onto the ground. Then 4 more shots, into his back, from less than a meter away, while Eliu lay defenseless on the ground. 6 shots, 4 seconds. One of the rounds to Eliu's back passed clean through his aorta. That single shot was fatal on its own, but Tahitahi didn't stop at 1. Eliu died within minutes. First responders arrived immediately, but it was already too late. This is what Crown Prosecutor Anna Devathasan would later call a well-planned and deliberately targeted execution-style shooting. Not one word of that was wrong. The moment the shots were fired, several witnesses in the crowd of 200 immediately ran after Tahitahi. He sprinted off the church grounds, jumped back into the waiting Mercedes. The car sped off toward PT England. Nobody else was hurt in the chaos that followed, but police already had what they needed: CCTV, the Mercedes, the scar on the shin. On 27th of December 2022, 10 days after the shooting, Thomas Tahitahi was arrested. He had been out of prison for less than a month before carrying out the killing, released on parole, back inside within weeks. Less than 1 month between walking out of prison and carrying out a broad daylight execution outside a church in front of 200 people. April 2024, Auckland High Court. Thomas Tahitahi stood in the dock, white dress shirt, 2 security guards on either side, and only one word spoken during the entire brief hearing: guilty. But then, he put forward a claim. He said this wasn't gang-related. He said he hadn't been a headhunter since 2015. He said he shot Eliu because Eliu had previously assaulted him and a family member in prison. The court didn't accept it. Court documents confirmed clearly, at the time of the shooting, Tahitahi was a patched member of the Headhunters. Not a former member, an active, patched member. Justice Simon Moore was direct about Tahitahi's claim that he hadn't meant to kill Eliu. That is nonsense. 6 shots, 4 into the back of a man already on the ground, from less than a meter away. There is no version of that which is accidental. But here's the question the court could not answer. Who gave the order? And who was the unknown person sitting in that Mercedes? Who drove Tahitahi away from the scene and has never been identified? That person remains unidentified, never arrested, still out there. 14th of August, 2024. Auckland High Court. Tahitahi sat in the dock. The public gallery was nearly full. In the front row, Daniel Eliu's family, one of Eliu's sons, stood and read a statement on behalf of his brother. He began by acknowledging God, then those who had passed, then those present in the room. Then he turned toward Tahitahi. It almost seems like yesterday that I got the news that my dad had been shot dead and was lying in his own blood. My question to you, brother, is why? The statement acknowledged that Eliu was not perfect, but he was their father. Justice Simon Moore sentenced Tahitahi to life imprisonment, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. He said, "You did this at a time when a community should have been able to come together and feel safe. As the Crown rightly says, this was a professional execution-style killing. Minimum 17 years before Tahitahi is eligible to apply for parole. The unknown person in the Mercedes, still not identified, still not charged." Here's what didn't make it into the headlines. Daniel Eliu wasn't killed simply because he was the president of the Notorious chapter. He was killed on the morning he was standing somewhere nobody would have expected him to be. A rehabilitation program. A church. Surrounded by 200 people trying to rebuild their lives. Was he genuinely changing, or was he simply managing appearances ahead of sentencing? We don't know, and now we never will. But here's what this case forces us to look at directly. Even when someone is trying to walk away, the world they came from doesn't necessarily let them go. That's not just Daniel Eliu's story. That's the reality for anyone trying to leave an organized gang in New Zealand. The exit is never clean, and sometimes there is no exit at all. The Grace Foundation was there that morning, doing exactly what it exists to do, but it couldn't protect the man standing outside its door. There's a question this case can't answer. Was Daniel Eliu, the man 6 months into a rehabilitation program, actually changing? We don't know. But here's what it forces us to reckon with as a community here in Aotearoa. Gang violence doesn't choose its moment. It doesn't choose its location, and it doesn't choose who's standing nearby when it happens. 200 people were at that church that morning, including children, to celebrate people turning their lives around. They went home carrying something none of them signed up for. The lesson here isn't simply, don't join a gang. The lesson is that we need exit pathways that are strong enough, safe enough, and protected enough that people who genuinely want out can actually get out. Organizations like Grace Foundation do that work every single day. But they can't do it alone, and a church car park in Papatoetoe on a Saturday morning proved exactly how exposed those moments of change can be. What do you reckon? Are we doing enough as a community to protect people who are genuinely trying to walk away?